I believe few people truly understood just how wide his interests were and how supportive he was of an incredibly diverse range of organizations. Windsor's walls have witnessed their share of secrets, betrayals, and whispered plans, but nothing quite like this. Behind the grand gates and carefully maintained smiles, a struggle was unfolding, duty clashing with conscience, ambition opposing innocence. At the center of it all was Princess Charlotte, a young girl who never asked for any of this. Charlotte embodies royal grace, bright-eyed, kind-hearted, and already beloved by millions. Yet behind closed doors, away from cameras and hidden beneath layers of royal protocol, she had become a pawn in a far crueler game than anyone outside the palace could have imagined. Rumor has it that Queen Camilla herself is behind it. According to insiders, Camilla, who has fought hard for years to secure her place beside King Charles, is now turning her attention to the next generation, but not to protect them. Instead, Camilla is focused on the future of her own grandchildren, the Parker Bowles line, making sure they are not overshadowed by the rising prominence of Charlotte, William, and Kate's child, the one destined to carry on Diana's legacy. What began as subtle manipulation quickly grew into something much darker. It was never about crowns or jewels, but about power and influence and legacy. Sources say Camilla made quiet moves like limiting Charlotte's public appearances, suggesting she take on fewer engagements as she grew older, and promoting the idea that the monarchy needs to modernize by distributing attention evenly among all royal grandchildren, including her own. However, Camilla had not counted on the silent observer nearby, Princess Anne. Known for her tireless dedication, Anne has long endured decades of scandal, tragedy, and royal conflicts in silence. But history was about to repeat itself, at the expense of an innocent child, and she found it unbearable. This is the story of how Princess Anne, often seen as the strict guardian of tradition, broke down in tears. In a moment that shook the family to its core, she chose to defy Camilla's calculated plans and protect Charlotte from the storm. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden battle behind palace walls, a confrontation that could change the monarchy's future, and the emotional breaking point of a princess who put family above all else. The story began quietly, so quietly that few in the royal circle noticed the change at first. Queen Camilla, who had previously preferred to stay in King Charles's shadow, had grown bolder. With Charles securely on the throne and her own position assured, Camilla's focus, according to palace whispers, shifted to something much more personal, securing the future of her own bloodline at the expense of those she saw as threats. At the top of that list was Princess Charlotte. Camilla's grandchildren, Lola, Eliza, Gus, Louis, and Freddie, held a unique place within the royal family. They were loved privately, but had no royal titles or duties, living somewhat outside the core of the monarchy. Yet Camilla felt that wasn't enough. After decades fighting for her place beside Charles, enduring public criticism and cold treatment both from the public and palace insiders, she wasn't about to let her grandchildren fall behind while Diana's granddaughter, the carrier of Diana's legacy, captured the public's affection. Camilla began planting seeds behind the scenes. According to insiders, it started with suggestions shared over tea at Clarence's house and subtle comments in private family meetings. She spoke of fairness and modernization. It was only right, she said softly but firmly, that all grandchildren be treated equally. On the surface, these words seemed noble, but those paying attention saw the real agenda, a quiet campaign to dim Charlotte's spotlight so her own grandchildren could shine brighter. The first sign appeared when Camilla reportedly suggested in a private meeting with Charles and senior aides that Charlotte's future role in the monarchy should be reconsidered amid plans to streamline royal duties. Camilla questioned whether it was truly necessary for Charlotte to take on such public responsibilities when she grew older. Wouldn't it be wiser and more modern to lighten the load on future generations? Beneath these carefully chosen words lay a cruel intent. to limit Charlotte's potential and clear the way for her own grandchildren. Insiders say Camilla didn't stop there. She allegedly began influencing scheduling decisions. Invitations for Charlotte to attend family events quietly disappeared. Public appearances that might have boosted Charlotte's profile were instead given to others, or canceled under the guise of slimming down the monarchy. At the same time, Camilla encouraged Charles to spend more time with her grandchildren, bringing them closer into the family's core while excluding Charlotte. Then came the media. While William and Kate had always protected their children's privacy, palace watchers noticed a strange pattern. Positive stories about Camilla's grandchildren began appearing in friendly outlets. Sweet anecdotes and charming photos introduced her family as a healthy, modern branch of the royals. Meanwhile, Charlotte's public moments became rarer, and her place in the family's spotlight steadily faded. Perhaps the most unsettling part of Camilla's plan was how carefully she kept her hands clean. There were no direct orders or obvious snubs, just quiet suggestions, crafted narratives, and subtle shifts. Camilla knew better than anyone the dangers of open conflict in royal circles. Having endured decades of being cast as a villain by the public, this time she intended to play the game with skill and subtlety. What Camilla hadn't counted on was someone else watching. Someone who understood the pain of silence and the heartbreak of seeing a child sacrificed for palace politics. Princess Anne, long devoted to duty above all else, found herself at a turning point. As Camilla's influence tightened around Charlotte, Anne's conscience stirred. What Camilla had carefully woven would eventually meet the one force she could not control, a determined aunt willing to risk everything to protect the next generation. Princess Anne had always been the family's steady anchor, the one who never wavered, hesitated, or let emotions get in the way of duty. From the moment she could walk, she was raised with unwavering loyalty to the crown. She worked harder than anyone else, stayed silent through the family's many scandals, and took pride in being the reliable one. The royal who could always be counted on to do what needed to be done, no matter the cost. But as Camilla's quiet campaign against Princess Charlotte advanced, something inside Anne began to shift. At first, she tried to ignore it. She reminded herself it wasn't her place to interfere. She wasn't Charlotte's mother. She wasn't even next in line for the throne. Her role was to honor tradition and protect the institution above all else. That's what she had always done. That's what she had to do. Still, guilt crept in like a rising tide. Anne started to notice what others overlooked or refused to accept. Small moments that troubled her conscience. A family dinner where Charlotte's name was noticeably absent from talk of future events, while Camilla's grandchildren were praised for their charm and promise. Charlotte was supposed to attend a charity event with her parents, but her name was quietly removed from the guest list at the last minute. Kate's subtle, pained expressions during these slights, masked behind her practiced royal smile, were impossible to ignore. In those moments, Anne couldn't help but think of Diana. She had never fully understood her sister-in-law before, but now she saw her differently. Diana had fought fiercely to shield William and Harry from palace intrigue. Anne, committed stoically to duty, had remained silent. And look what happened. Diana was isolated, heartbroken, and ultimately lost. Was history about to repeat itself? Late at night, alone in her apartments at Gatcombe Park, Anne was haunted by memories she thought were long buried. Diana had once shed quiet tears in her presence, the pain of watching William and Harry follow their mother's coffin, burdened by royal expectations crushing their small shoulders. And now, here was Charlotte, bright and innocent, caught in another royal storm. Anne could see the coming tempest. Inside her, a fierce struggle raged. One part of her, the hardened princess who had devoted her life to the crown, urged her to stay the course, to let things be. This wasn't her battle. Speaking out risked dividing the family, undermining the king, and casting a shadow over the monarchy at a time when it couldn't afford more scandal. But the other part, the aunt, grandmother, and woman who had witnessed Diana's tragedy and vowed never to allow such pain again, could not stay silent. Every slight against Charlotte felt like a betrayal. Every whispered plot to derail the girl's future felt like a stab in Anne's soul. She began to pull away from Camilla, no longer able to pretend affection. Conversations grew tense, polite but cold. At family gatherings, Anne searched for Charlotte, offering small gestures of kindness, a reassuring hand on the shoulder, a warm smile, a gentle word of encouragement. But inside, Anne knew it wasn't enough. The guilt became unbearable. She could no longer pretend she didn't see what was happening. Deep down, she realized she would soon have to choose between the crown and her conscience, between loyalty to the monarch and doing what was right. The question wasn't if Anne would act anymore. That's when Camilla had no idea how close her plans were to unraveling. It was meant to be just another quiet afternoon at Windsor, a private family meeting in the name of unity. Away from the public's gaze and the ever-watchful cameras, the setting was intimate. A drawing room steeped in history, its walls lined with portraits of long-dead rulers, their eyes seeming to watch over the living's struggles. But what happened that day became a turning point no one there would ever forget. Only a few people attended, by design. King Charles had called the meeting, hoping to ease rising tensions before they spilled beyond the palace walls. Camilla, calm and calculating as always, sat beside him like the queen she had fought so hard to be. Kate appeared composed, though a storm brewed behind her eyes, a mother's fierce anger barely restrained. William stood at her side, protective and tense, his jaw clenched tight enough to seem painful, and Princess Anne watched silently, torn between a lifetime of duty and a moral line she could no longer ignore. Camilla made it clear from the start of the meeting that she intended to take charge. Using her usual gentle tone and polished charm, she spoke about the monarchy's future, the need for balance and fairness. "It's time to consider the roles of all the grandchildren," she said. Her words were sweet, but carried a sting. "We don't want any of them to feel overlooked. Not my grandchildren, not Charlotte, not George, not even Louis. Everything must be equal, modern, and progressive." But those who really listened understood her meaning. Camilla wasn't calling for fairness. She was trying to level the playing field by diminishing Charlotte's importance. By quietly downplaying the young princess's role, Camilla could push her own grandchildren closer to the spotlight, influence, and the throne's future. Kate's hands clenched the armrest of her chair, turning her knuckles white. William's face was tight with restrained anger. But it was Anne who felt the deepest shock. She had suspected Camilla's intentions, but hearing them spoken so calmly and coldly made everything painfully clear. Anne finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "Charlotte is the daughter of the future king. She is part of that future, just like George and Louis. There's no reason to diminish her role." Camilla smiled politely, but there was steel beneath it. "No one is putting anyone down, Anne. But times have changed. The monarchy must evolve with the times. We can't let past mistakes dictate our future." Those words, past mistakes, hung heavily in the air. Anne took them as a direct jab at Diana's memory, the very legacy Camilla had long tried to reshape. In that moment, Anne understood the full extent of Camilla's plan, not only to shape the future but to erase the past. The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that signals a coming storm. Charles looked troubled, caught between his wife's ambition and his sister's rising defiance. Kate's eyes glistened, but she stood strong. William's hand found hers, a silent show of unity. That meeting changed Anne's life forever. The princess, who had long stood for royal duty, now had a new mission: to protect Charlotte from becoming another casualty of palace politics. Camilla left thinking she had won the day, but she didn't notice the determination hardening in Anne's eyes, the storm building behind her calm exterior. The Queen's plan had just met its toughest challenge yet, a determined aunt ready to act. This happened on what was supposed to be a joyful occasion, a sunny garden party at Sandringham, a rare chance for the royal family to present a united front to the public. But beneath the polite chatter, clinking glasses, and fluttering decorations, tension filled the air. Princess Anne tried to steady herself, hiding her feelings behind layers of royal composure, but this time she couldn't. The day began innocently enough. Charlotte, wearing a pastel blue dress with a ribbon in her hair, the color Diana loved, was excited to attend. The young princess, bright and eager, wanted to please her family. She curtsied properly, greeted guests gracefully, and stayed close to Kate, looking up for quiet reassurance. But as the afternoon went on, Anne noticed the small, deliberate slights that could easily be missed by those not paying attention. Camilla, always the picture of grandmotherly warmth in public, kept her grandchildren close, doting on them and pulling them into conversations with senior royals and important guests. Charlotte, despite being the future king's daughter, was quietly pushed to the sidelines. At one point, the children were gathered for a casual photo with their grandparents. Camilla arranged the group carefully, making sure her own grandchildren were front and center. When Charlotte hesitated at the edge, Camilla turned to her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Why don't you let the little ones have their moment? You've had plenty of attention." Though spoken kindly, the words hit like a slap. Charlotte's smile faltered. She stepped back, uncertainty flashing across her face, her small hands twisting together, revealing her hurt. Kate moved toward her daughter instinctively, but Anne was faster. Time seemed to freeze. Anne saw Diana in that moment, a young woman isolated, pushed aside, made to feel small within these walls, and she watched history repeat itself. The weight of decades, the shame of silence, and the regret of inaction came crashing down. Before she could stop herself, Anne stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "That's enough, Camilla." The words hung in the room, stunning everyone who heard them. The staff froze. Charles, in mid-conversation, turned sharply, his expression horrified. Camilla blinked, as if shocked that Anne had spoken up. Anne's voice cracked with emotion. "This is not how we treat one of our own. Charlotte has every right to stand here proudly, just like any other child. Don't make her feel otherwise." A hush fell over the group. For the first time in years, Anne's composed facade cracked. Tears filled her eyes, not only for Charlotte, but for Diana, for the family divisions she had witnessed, and for every moment she had stayed silent when she should have fought. Camilla, caught off guard, tried to recover, but it was too late. The damage was done. Anne's words broke the unspoken rule of royal gatherings: maintain calm at all costs. Yet in that moment it was clear Anne had chosen something more important than peace. She had chosen Charlotte. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Courtiers rushed to smooth things over. Charles, caught between his wife and sister, seemed to age in an instant. But Anne didn't care. The time for silence was over. For the first time in decades, the Princess Royal felt the heavy bonds of duty give way to something stronger: love. In the days after Anne's bold stand, the palace atmosphere shifted in ways the public never saw. The long-standing rift was finally undeniable. Beneath the polished smiles at events and the perfectly arranged family portraits, the royal family had been shaken to its core. While Camilla felt the sting of Anne's rebuke, Kate and William quietly began to respond, not with anger or public statements, but with the steady determination only parents possess. They understood the stakes. Charlotte was more than just a royal child. She was Diana's grandchild, a living symbol of the hope for a kinder, modern monarchy. Kate and William weren't about to let Camilla or anyone else dim that light. Their first move was subtle. Working with trusted aides, they tightened the circle around Charlotte. Invitations to certain family gatherings were politely declined. Instead, they focused on creating a warm, secure home environment where Charlotte could grow free from the cold shadow of palace politics. Charlotte thrived at Kensington and Windsor, seen as a bright, curious girl rather than a pawn in royal games. Kate, thoughtful beneath her calm exterior, took further steps. She carefully managed Charlotte's public appearances, not too many, but always meaningful. When Charlotte was in the spotlight, it was for causes that reflected her spirit. Children's charities, environmental efforts, and moments that quietly honored Diana's legacy of kindness and service. Kate's efforts changed the story. Charlotte was no longer the overlooked princess. She represented the future, a softer, more genuine royal family. William played his part too. At official events, he made a point of including Charlotte in small but meaningful ways, offering his hand as they walked or pausing to speak with her openly in front of the cameras. Each gesture sent the same message. This is my daughter. She belongs here. And then there was Princess Anne. The friendship that blossomed between Anne and Charlotte after that difficult garden party grew stronger every day. Where Anne had once kept a respectful distance from the younger royals, she became an unexpected ally. Insiders say Anne often sought Charlotte out at family events, offering quiet encouragement and sharing the royal secrets of endurance, how to stay strong, persevere, and remain true to oneself despite the weight of the crown. Camilla found herself increasingly isolated. The charm that had once smoothed over many of her schemes no longer worked. Courtiers grew cautious, reluctant to side with a queen whose ambitions were faltering. According to insiders, Charles grew more hesitant, less willing to back Camilla's plans when they involved the grandchildren. Kate and William had drawn a clear line. Even as the palace continued to project an image of unity, the real battle had been won behind closed doors, not with drama or confrontation, but through quiet strength, careful strategy, and unwavering love. In protecting Charlotte, William and Kate did more than shield their daughter. They sent a clear message to the world and the family. Diana's legacy lives on, and no amount of palace intrigue can silence it again. Within the monarchy's grand halls, where loyalty is often shown through silence and sacrifice, Princess Anne's tearful stand was a rare and powerful break from tradition. The princess, who had devoted her life to duty over emotion, chose to speak from the heart. In doing so, she not only defended Charlotte but also reminded the entire royal family what true service means, not to the throne, but to the people who uphold it. Camilla's carefully crafted web of influence was torn apart, not by scandal or public backlash, but by the quiet power of family solidarity. Her plans for her grandchildren, masked as calls for fairness and progress, were exposed as a thinly veiled effort to reshape the future, undermine Diana's legacy, and secure her own family's place in the next generation. Camilla underestimated both the strength of tradition and the deep love that binds William, Kate, and now Anne in their mission to protect it. Charlotte, still very young, may never fully grasp the turmoil swirling around her during those difficult months, but she will always feel the unwavering support of those who stood by her when it mattered most. She will grow up knowing her place in the royal line was defended not only by birthright, but by people who refused to let history repeat itself. Anne stepped out from the shadows of duty, with her head held higher than ever. Many came to see her as an unexpected hero, the aunt who chose love over silence, honesty over convenience, rather than the strict guardian of royal rules. In the end, the battle for Charlotte was fought not with crowns or titles, but with bravery, tears, and a quiet resolve to do what was right. Diana's spirit lives on in this simple yet powerful act of family protection. Not in grand statues or lavish ceremonies. Sometimes the strongest stand is taken with a trembling voice and tear-streaked cheeks.